So, apart from all being prime ministers, what have Tony Blair, Gordon Brown, David Cameron, Theresa May, Boris Johnson, Rishi Sunak, and Keir Starmer all got in common? Well, they all tried to fix our adult social care system. Theresa May lost her majority because she tried to fix our adult social care system. So the question is, can Andy Burnham succeed where all those have failed? Hi, I'm the political geek that is Martin Curtis, and this is Change from the Centre. And today we're going to talk about adult social care, a system designed for a different Britain. It's worth saying, before I get into the meat of this, that I am a former council leader, and before I was leader, I had responsibility for adult social care within the cabinet. So I've got a bit of knowledge of this topic. And one of the things that amazes me is how little adult social care has changed in the 12 years since I walked away from local government, despite the fact that it is in dire need of reform. Part of the reason for that is that successive prime ministers have basically gone into this with lots of will, but when they've started to unravel it and realise how complex the problem is, and as they started to relay that complexity and the cost of that complexity to backbenchers, it's become very, very difficult. And so rather than deal with the problem, they've basically thrown a load of money at it and kicked it into the long grass. I hope that Andy Burnham comes in as Prime Minister with enough knowledge to know that he's dealing with a complex problem. And I hope that means that he's got a bit more of a will to actually deal with it. But there is a reality. Adult social care is complicated. And part of the complication is the reform that's needed has to deal with a really significant demographic problem. So what this graph shows is that the number of people aged over 80 has doubled in the last 40 years and is going to double again in the next 40 years. So we have an aging population. Now, let's be clear here, that's a great thing, but you're more likely to have complex needs when you're over 80. And so we've got this demographic that works against us. And it means that the system is getting more and more expensive. We shouldn't hide from that, because the debate that's going on at the moment and what Kemi Badenoch is saying is no new taxes. And what that graph shows is that no new taxes now or change now means significantly more taxes later on. And that's made worse by the fact that the number of people aged over 80 is increasing at that rate, but the population increase is somewhat slower. And so the proportion that you're having to pay of your taxes towards adult social care is going to get higher and higher. So that's the fundamental reason why we cannot just ignore this problem and we cannot kick it into the long grass. You throw money at this, and all that happens is over time that money gets eaten. And for me, you've got to find a way of funding adult social care so that it beats that demographic profile. And there are ways of doing it. The Japanese have got a system, as an example, where they put additional income tax onto people aged over 40 to fund social care. There are all sorts of other ways of doing it, and that's part of what they've got to look at. So this notion of no new taxes, I think, has got to really be got rid of so that we can have a genuinely honest conversation about how we fix it. So aside from that demographic time bomb, which we have to resolve, the other thing that we have to look at is the complexity of our care system. So the two main bodies that are involved are probably the NHS and councils. And we know they have problems interacting because of the bed blocking problem we have, where an older person is ready to be discharged from hospital and they need a care home space, but the council is unable to provide a care home space, and so they stay in hospital and they take up space that somebody else might need. But those aren't the only bodies involved. There are a huge number. I put this together and I could probably have thought this through and made it even bigger and even busier, but I don't need to. The one on there that I am going to stress is unpaid carers. Those are the people that are going up the road to visit their next door neighbour or their parents. They're doing a bit of care for them, maybe doing a little bit of nursing for them as well. You never know. But they are doing things that if they didn't do it, the state would have to pay for and the NHS would have to pay for. And so they're saving us money. So as we go through a process that looks at how we deal with our social care system, unpaid carers absolutely have to be at the heart of it. And all of that complexity costs money. So it's probably reassuring to see Andy Burnham talking about a national care service as his solution to this problem. And I think that will probably strip the responsibility away from councils and give it basically to an NHS body. And there are all sorts of reasons why I think that's a good thing. One of them is that the change that the government is making to local government through the local government reorganisation process is a bit of a botch job, to be honest. And one of the things it's going to do is increase the cost of care, because you're splitting a council. Say, I live in Cambridgeshire. So Cambridgeshire, we are currently 2 local authorities, Peterborough and Cambridgeshire County Council, who have responsibility for adult social care. The split is going to create 3 bodies, and that means 3 sets of management, 3 sets of overhead to deal with the most complex problem that councils deal with. That's not a good thing. So this National Care Service is probably needed. Before I move on and talk about the implications that this is having on councils, I just want to make a quick plea. If you're enjoying this video, you're finding it informative, please subscribe. It's one of a number of different types of videos I do in Change from the Centre, all about centre ground politics, some of it commentary, some of it informative to try and let people know what it is that needs to happen and why, like this one. So please consider subscribing. I'd really appreciate it. And let me know what you think in the comments as well. So there are all sorts of other reasons why it makes sense to take social care powers away from councils. Most important one is almost certainly the fact that you cannot simplify social care while you maintain that council NHS split. And you'll never ever solve this bed blocking issue, as an example, while the 2 of them coexist as different entities. But it is also true that the cost of adult social care is absolutely crippling councils at the moment. So when you see on social media all this stuff about the fact that our potholes are not being repaired, our roads are falling to rack and ruin and all that stuff, it's not untrue, but the cause of it isn't that councils don't care about roads. It is that they are having to fund social care and it is eating up more and more of their pie. So this graph basically shows it. 2013-14, 52 pence in every pound was being spent on adult social care. 10 years later, that figure has gone up to 61 pence in the pound. So that's roughly just short of a 20% increase. So we can see that councils are struggling to provide core services because they are having to provide social care. Incidentally, it's similar for children's social care as well, by the way. So we can start to see that there is a real point about moving adult social care into a different place and into a national care service. My problem with the National Care Service is it is too big. I also don't think it will have the political accountability that social care has at the moment. And so my preference would be for the government to take adult social care and think about it in the context of what government needs to look like in 10 years' time, which is one of the things we talk about a lot in Change from the Centre, and I've done a couple of videos about that, and I'll link to one in the description. But that's what we need to be doing. In particular, for me, it makes sense for adult social care to, and the responsibility for care as a whole, to be moved into regional government. But we need regional government in the first place to make that happen. What I hope I have shown here is that adult social care cannot just stay as it is. And there's a reality that if we don't reform social care, it becomes a greater and greater burden on the state and is a system that doesn't work for people. And we really don't need that in this country. We've got too much of it. Services that aren't working well enough and are costing us too much. We also have to recognise that Andy Burnham is not going to fix this in 3 years. And that's why the political parties sitting around a table and talking about the future of adult social care is important. But Kemi Badenoch cannot sit around that table and say this has to be done without any increases in taxation. No new taxation methods now mean greater and greater costs further down the road. And that's in nobody's interest. We have to be looking in the long to medium term to reducing the taxation burden in this country. And one of the ways we can do that is to remodel social care and remodel the funding of social care so that funding works with the demographics rather than working against it as it does now. Thank you very much for taking your time to listen to what I've got to say. If it's given you a bit of food for thought, if you like what I've said, please consider subscribing. It'll mean that you're notified when more videos come out, and it helps me to grow the channel as well. So once again, thank you very much, and I'll see you again soon.